Have you ever started making a song where you come up with a 4-bar loop that you're really excited about? But as you keep writing, you feel like your song is getting increasingly more boring despite adding more instruments, more samples, and more tracks. If you're making a 3-minute song, there's only so much you can do about the melody to maintain the hook and not clutter it with too many different elements. Sometimes you just have to change things up a little bit to keep the listener's attention. And in this video, we will look at how you can make a great song even better with 5 easy modulations that you can use in your own music. Some weeks ago, RickBeatowhere live streamed a video talking about how modern music had gotten extremely boring lately. And one of the main culprits he mentioned was the lack of key changes or modulations. And while his critique might not be completely accurate, and YouTuber 12tone actually has a good video explaining why this critique might not be completely accurate, it still brings up a good point. Namely, that modulations can make a song infinitely more interesting. You can think of a modulation as changing the color or the scene of the music you're making. Think of a sitcom, like Friends for example. Most of the jokes and dialogue in that show is not at all dependent on the location of the characters. But by changing the scene between Joey and Chandler's apartment, Rachel and Monica's apartment, and the coffee house, they create dynamics and keep things interesting. Because keeping everything in one room would be boring. And the same applies for music. So let us look at 5 easy modulations, even though the last one is pretty complicated, that you can use in your own music to instantly level up your songs. Number 1, the classical. Major 1 to major 5, or minor 1 to major 3. Side note, some of these names are just made up by me. The classical modulation is based off of common standards from classical music. This modulation is standard in music spanning from the Baroque era to modern times, and it consists of a key change from the major 1 to the major 5 in major keys, or from the minor 1 to the parallel major 3rd in minor keys. Let us look at how we can use these modulations by using Twinkle Twinkle Little Star in the key of C. The 5th chord in C major is G major. And this means that we have to modulate from 0 sharps and flats in the key of C major to 1 sharp in the key of G major. And one simple way of doing this is to add the major 5 chord in the key of G major or the major 2 chord in the key of C major, which is D major. And by adding the 7th in the chord, we create a strong tension that leads the ear towards the key of G major. And once we made our way to D7, we can simply land on the G major chord, having established G major as the new key. Now let's see how we can modulate from minor 1 to major 3. This is a simpler modulation because we're simply moving to the parallel key. If we go from A minor to C major, we can simply use the 4 and the 5 of the new key, the C major, which are the 6 and the 7 of the A minor to establish C major as a new key, like this. Number 2, slap a 7 on it. A very common key change in pop and rock music is going from the root key to the key of the 4 chord. This is also useful in the classical modulation in order to get from the key of the 5 chord back to the root key. This is a fairly easy modulation because all you have to do is add the dominant flat 7 to the root chord. This will automatically draw the ear of the listener to the 4 chord as the new root key, as the dominant 7 note in the 4 chord doesn't exist in the original key. Number 3, the Nintendo Modulation. I call this the Nintendo Modulation because it's used in basically every classic Nintendo game. However, not always as a modulation. You might recognize this sound, or this theme, or this. This is the flat 6, flat 7 cadence, which is a very powerful chord progression that allows you to modulate to almost any key. Since this chord progression uses the flat 7, it has the characteristics of a deceptive cadence. Instead of going 4, 5, 1, you go to the minor 6 instead, like this. But instead of going to the expected minor 6, it establishes a new major 1. Double deceptive. This progression gives you a lot of options and a really cool sound. And you can pick almost any major chord regardless of what key you're in, and play 3 major keys in a row, one whole step apart from each other, and the third chord will establish the new key. You will have to do this a little bit discreetly, but with a little bit of practice and experience, you can find a million ways to use this chord progression and this modulation. Here's an example. Number 4, the trucker's gear shift or the Eurovision key change. This one is quite a cliche. It's probably the easiest one to use, but it has gotten a bad reputation because it's been overused in certain genres in a way to extend the chorus and add something new without really adding something new. But if you use it creatively, it can really add something to your music. The way you do this one is simple. You simply take your idea, whether it's a chorus or verse or something else, you present it in the root key, and then you just repeat it a half step above the original key. It's very simple, but it can be effective and jolt your listeners back into paying attention to your music again. And a quick bonus tip is to modulate the color of that like button, because it really helps the algorithm so that more people can benefit from these tips. Thank you. Number 5, the merry-go-round. This modulation is the most complex on the list. But what's really cool about it is that it can go on forever, and you can circle through all the minor keys in the circle of fifths forever. You can use this modulation to break up certain patterns you have established, create a slight variation, and then land back into the original chord progression and melody you've established, but in a completely different key. So let's look at how we can do this. So the progression looked like this. This progression is using a pivot chord to make the chords sound coherent with each other. The flat 7 chord of the first key is enharmonic, meaning it sounds the same as the major 3 7th chord of the new key. So you get a smooth transition between the keys that you can continue forever. If you start out in a minor key, you can simply jump straight in by using the flat 7. However, if you're in a major key, you can use either the flat 7, the 5-7, or the 1-7, the same one from the slap a 7 on it, and that way launch into this modulation loop. When you finally land on the key you would like to continue in, you make the 1 chord major instead of minor, like this. of these progressions are also available in the video description if you would like to save them and use them in your music later. There you have it, 5 easy key changes that you can use in your own music. So which one was your favorite? And also, if you have some additional key changes that you like to use that weren't discussed in this video, I would love to hear about them in the comment section below. That's it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. And in the meantime, you can check out this video right here that talks about how you can find awesome chord progressions in any key without knowing music theory.